Hello, welcome to another Unity game development video. Um, Today I wanted to go over something that is kind of like a component of 3D platformers, and that's how the character kind of moves and rotates independently of the camera. Unlike first-person perspective, which inherently you kind of have to face the direction of the camera because the perspective is that of the character's head that's tied to the camera itself. But in third-person camera, it's kind of this ethereal, floating, orbiting camera, and the character can face many different directions independently of which way the camera is facing. So if I press play in my game here, and as soon as it starts up, I can rotate the camera freely around the player, and I can move and walk around independently of where the camera is facing. So if I were to hold down and left, the character can run down into the left, and I can rotate the camera towards maybe the center of the area. And this allows for very kind of intuitive movement for 3D platformers. Right now the camera is kind of fixed and clamped into this downward looking angle, and that'll change in a later iteration of my game. But say that red platform right there was a boss. If I wanted to run around them, say like how you would in Spyro when you're circling the enemy, I could just hold left on the keyboard, and I can focus on the enemy using my mouse. And if I wanted to run away from that enemy and still focus on them, as long as I have kind of like the hand-eye coordination to put in the proper inputs for movement, I can still focus on that platform or that enemy while moving around however I need to. So I've seen a lot of different ways that developers have achieved this kind of way that the character can face in the direction of the movement. It's pretty much matching the movement vector of the character. And a very common one that I've seen is that if you've set up your movement in such a way that it takes into consideration two different vectors, kind of your vertical and your horizontal vectors, and it kind of takes those and it combines them into one movement that can be translated into a character controller or a rigid body. And if that's not how you're operating your character, there's a different way that you could do it, and this is what I've come to use. And if I just move over to the Visual Studio, and I scroll down, and I have this function, this enumerator here, this coroutine, and what it's doing is it is grabbing a vector 3, this p1 variable. It is grabbing the transform of the character, excluding the y position because we don't really want the character to tilt like that. Though I could see that being useful for if instead of animating the kind of angled rise and fall of the character I could just keep them in a locked forward arching position and kind of rotate the character if they're jumping. Just set a bool for if they're jumping, then take into consideration the y variable. But we're not doing that for this. It's grabbing the x and z transform position of the character, so that's the p1, and is waiting in real time for 0.01 seconds. And it is grabbing the transform, the x and z transform of the character again, but is storing that in a separate variable called p2. And then we're finding the vector between them with this vector 3 change in position by just simply subtracting p2 and p1. That's how you find vectors between objects. You just subtract the second or the target from the kind of the viewer or the subject. And so p2 minus p1 equals our what is it called? Looking vector, pretty much. And then the coroutine is pretty much checking if there is any difference between those two vector 3s. Then the character is going to rotate based on that new quaternion with the look rotation of that vector 3, that change in position. that looking vector that we established between those two. And it's pretty much just, so it's just, if I went into MS Paint here, and let's say this is your position P1 at some given time, and then you move, and then 0.01 seconds later, this is your next position at P2. This movement right here, that's our vector. That's our change in position vector, and it is going to, assume this is an overhead perspective, it is going to align the character to face that new position. So this is going to just reset as the next position, and then it's gonna, next time you move, this is gonna become P1, and this is gonna be P2, and it's just detecting that vector between those 2 points. So then it's gonna rotate the character to align to that, and it's very, very simple. For me, I thought it was kind of common sense, and it took a little bit to get it to work. This is a nice little function or coroutine that I got working for it. And I'm only running this when, where is it? It's within the player movement script. I believe it's only running if, yeah, if the character's moving. I have a separate boolean detecting if the character's moving, and that's pretty much just if any of the input is being placed in there. So if the character's moving, then it runs this coroutine, and it's actively checking for changes in position, and it's rotating the character based on that change. It's establishing that vector between the 2 points. So as I hold and move, it's actively rotating the character like that. Later I'll add a lerp or slurp or whatever to have the character kind of slowly change positions like that, because right now it jumps if you switch between them. But for testing purposes, this is good for what we want. But I just thought that might be interesting for anybody watching. So if you liked the video, you thought it was interesting or helpful, please subscribe. Actually go down and like the video, like the YouTube function they have where you can rate it. And that's about it. Just see you in the next video. Thanks for watching, and bye.